The Earnestly Speaking podcast is a show that is founded on free-flowing conversation and may at times venture into mature subjects. Listener discretion is advised.
First Week Podcast, coming to you June 13th, 2023. It's a sad day here in the Christian household. First off, the Heat season, well, the NBA season is over. The Heat season is over officially. The Denver Nuggets win their first ever NBA championship. But also it sucks because as a whole, as a basketball diehard, NBA season's officially over. Sad times. Now, I mean, obviously, you still have the draft next week. You got free agency coming up, too, which this year, if you listen to my guests in this podcast the last couple of weeks, specifically Danny Thompson, the episode we did 2 weeks ago, he expects to be a very active offseason for big names. It very well may be. Still got Summer League, which is kind of fun to watch at times. I'm not fully invested in Summer League, but I do watch it from time to time. This time of year, this is the time of year where I start to lay back a little bit and, you know, catch them on TV shows I'm behind on and other projects. And I know wrestling now comes from, especially wrestling comes front and center. Obviously, baseball is now a priority. My Mets suck now. I mean, they're terrible right now. Still in the race, but season's going away right in June. But of course, this podcast, all podcast catchers, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, you name it, all that good stuff. Also, folks, check out my YouTube page at youtube.com/@Earnest Christian. We get clips of the show, other shows, other projects I'm working on in the future. All right. So let's get to it first. This episode is called the Jokic Coronation because Nikola Jokic has done it. He's Finals MVP. He wins his first championship. The Nuggets win in 5 games. Which, by the way, although I never made an actual prediction publicly, I did say before the series started that I had Nuggets in 5 to play Miami, and I had Nuggets in 6 to play Boston. That's the record. So I am technically right on that one. And I actually did think Nuggets win 5 games, honestly. First NBA title for the Nuggets ever. After 47, I think, years. And it's time to... If it wasn't obvious before, it's obvious now. Nikola Jokic is the best player in the NBA. You're talking about a guy that, in the last 2 years, was the MVP of this league, the most valuable player. Could have won it this year for a third straight year, but we know there are a lot of really bad faith arguments behind that, although I still would have said Joel Embiid. And I still stand by that. And again, these MVP race talks are stupid because, number one, it is a 82-game sample, not a legacy, not a future, not the playoffs. It's a 82-game regular season award. Who was the best player in those 82 games? But Jokic is now the best player in basketball. And he caps off with this legendary run. There hasn't been... I have not seen most dominant playoff runs like this in my lifetime. I mean, I always think of Jordan, of course. You think of LeBron's couple runs here and there. But Jokic, he led the playoffs in scoring average, rebounding average, and assist average. That's insane. They beat Minnesota in 5 in the first round. Beat the Suns in 6 in a series that, honestly, it may look close because it's 6 games. It wasn't that close, honestly. And then you look at they beat also the Lakers in a sweep. And, of course, the Miami Heat in these finals in 5 games. Best player in the league, guys. Best player in the league. And, you know, like I said, I was telling a couple of people, you know, I know, you know, Nuggets fans, you know, I'm friends with that. Easy team to root for. I don't know if you watched the sort of post game after, with which I got some sound bites for that though. But Jokic, not a star in a way, not very flashy, very simple guy, and his story is very, very compelling. And how can you not love this guy? How can you not love this guy? Honestly, he's easy to root for. The team's easy to root for. I find the Jamal Murray story actually just as compelling, honestly, in the fact that Jamal Murray, who also had a great series, especially in moments, first that game 3, him and Jokic with both triple doubles. His story of missing nearly the last 2 years because of torn ACLs, and come back in a big way and elevating his game in the playoffs. And look, if you didn't know who Jamal Murray was this year, you sure as hell know who he is now. This Nuggets team is easy to root for. It wasn't for them playing my favorite team, my favorite sports team I root for in all sports, the Miami Heat. I root for Denver Nuggets in this whole way. I actually root for Denver in the first 3 rounds. I root for Denver against Minnesota. I root for Denver against Phoenix, and I root for Denver against the Lakers. So it's an easy team to root for. And they, this team reminds me a lot of the Spurs, Tim Duncan Spurs. Well, Jokic is like Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan's another guy, top 10 guy all time, number 7 on my list, in fact. And not very unassuming. He comes in, does his job. They call him Mr. Fundamentals for a reason. Wasn't flashy. He's got a job done. Won 5 rings. Could have won 6. Thank God he didn't win 6 because it came at an expense to beat my Miami Heat in 2013. Oh, they beat us next year after that. And Jokic, in Denver now, this team, I said it last night. I said this before, weeks ago when they were on this trek to the finals, and I'll say it now. This team is set up great for the next couple of years. Their entire core is set up to win for another couple of years. That's what the core of Jokic, obviously, Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and Aaron Gordon, the core 4, locked up contract-wise for at least 3 years. Jokic's new contract he just signed this past offseason only kicks in now, this year, this coming season, the next season. So Denver's in a good spot here, especially when you consider this new CBA. And we spoke about the CBA thing in the last couple of weeks on the show, how much it's going to change a lot of things in the league going forward. How teams react probably as early as this summer. It's going to affect a lot of things, and yet Denver is in a good spot here. They have their guys. Going to have KCP for another year probably, or 2. I look at this contract again, but their core 4 is locked and loaded for the next 2-3 years. No other team can really say that. Milwaukee's rebuilding slowly, doing a little bit of rebuild, a little retooling here. Boston may not lose Jaylen Brown. We'll see how that plays out this summer. The Lakers are getting old. Phoenix, and they need to build around Booker and KD. They have questions. The Clippers have injury questions. You look at all the contenders in the league. Miami, they had to figure out the roster going forward. Philadelphia may not lose James Harden this summer. Every contending team in the league. Golden State might break up. We'll see. Memphis and John Morant's issues are going to miss a chunk of games because of the suspension coming up. That should be handed out any day now. Denver is the one contender that's stable, that knows who they are, barring injury. They're going to be okay for the next couple of years, which is why a repeat is very possible. I know Michael Malone said last night at the end of the game, he said that, just because you got this one doesn't mean we want more. It may sound a little braggadocious in the moment saying that while you're getting your trophy, but if you look at the rest of the league right now, at least in this moment, we'll see what moves be made in the weeks to come and days to come and all that. But Denver is in the best spot of any team right now to repeat. So now you now beg the question: now is the Nuggets the new Warriors? Are they the new Warriors? I mean, the fast answer is no, because there's a certain structure in place that is similar to Golden State, where when Golden State won the first title in 2015, they were lucky in the sense that Steph Curry's deal at the time was very low, a small value deal. I think Dre was on a rookie deal at the time too. Klay Thompson was on a low deal as well too. And then the year the salary cap exploded, the 2016, the year after they lost to the Cavs in the finals, they were able to get KD still because of having those other contracts, those stolen value deals, and then able to re-sign Steph at some point. So there's a lot of luck involved in that. In Denver's case, and I don't know all the particulars of the salary. I know they're one of the teams that has a pretty high salary cap, pretty high payroll, and they may be nudged up into that second apron situation in the next couple of years or so. I think. We'll see. But at the very least, they are intact contract-wise with the four guys for the next 2 or 3 years. So I don't know if I'll go so far as say that they are the Warriors, but there's some similarities in that case. Although I will say the new salary structure now is actually going to work against them instead of for them in the same way Golden State, not the same way Golden State got benefited from the salary going up in 2016. And maybe able to get Kevin Durant. So I don't go as far as the new Warriors, but they are probably the only team right now capable of reeling up another title in the next year or two. In fact, if you ask me right now, who's the favorites going to next year, I'm saying Denver Nuggets in a heartbeat. And I think it's Denver, and there may not be a close second right now because I don't know what's going on in the rest of the league. Like, Milwaukee will be the team to look at next, but Milwaukee's going to be retooling. We'll see how they do the roster. Milwaukee's getting sneaky older, too, also. Be very careful about that. I mean, Boston is still really good, but do you trust Boston, Phoenix? Like I said, all those things that's mentioned, they all have issues to deal with. Denver is the only team, the contenders, that actually have a fairly clean slate moving forward and a fair coast to, at the very least, they're going to be in the conversation in the next couple of years. These are definitely new Spurs, though. I'll tell you now, these feel like the new Spurs. So that I will say. So, again, congrats to Nick Jokic, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, those guys. Fabulous team. Watch them all year long. I know a lot of folks are like, oh, how did Denver beat Miami? A lot of casual fans not understanding this. Clearly, you don't watch the Nuggets on a day-to-day basis because people like me who actually watch NBA basketball, because I love the game basketball, not because of my favorite team, also because of the fact that I like watching basketball as a whole. This Nuggets team is fantastic. They're amazing. They're amazing. So, congrats to the Nuggets on their first title ever, NBA title. As for the Miami Heat, and now this is where I'm going to have way more fun because this is my team. I've been a fan 34 years. I am so proud of this team. I mean, again, this team was literally 3 minutes in a play-in game after losing the first play-in game to the Atlanta Hawks on a Tuesday. Literally a play-in game on a Friday against Chicago at home from missing the playoffs in its entirety. And even after getting the job done there, I had no confidence they beat the Milwaukee Bucks. I had Bucks in 5 when the series started, and then Giannis gets hurt in Game 1. Misses Game 1, Heat steal Game 1, lose Game 2. Giannis didn't play Game 2, and then play Game 3 as well too. So he take a 2-1 lead. Then I'm thinking, okay, well, Giannis is back now. Things got to normal again. And then Jimmy Butler went off. Jimmy Butler went apoplectic. 56 points in Game 4, 41 points in Game 5. Both the Heat wins, eliminate the best team with the best record in basketball this year. And then faced the Knicks, who I had the Heat winning 6 games, but I was still concerned because the Knicks coming off the series win against Cleveland, they felt like the better team. Like Miami's win felt a little fluky in the first round, somewhat. And then Miami took their business there. And then the Boston series, the crazy Boston series where Heat go up 3-0, blew a 3-0 lead, almost lose Game 6 in heartbreak fashion, and then Game 7 and come around and beat Boston in Boston. If you ask me, if you had told me that you would, because there were fans actually saying, you know what, they'd rather lost the play-in game to get that fucking draft pick instead of a chance to go to the finals. This is what happens when stupidity. When you create stupidity trying logic out of stupidity. There are literally people I know. There are people on media who are saying that the Heat should lose this game in Chicago so they can get a draft pick. Get a draft pick, no big deal. Not knowing this team will actually go to the fucking finals. Okay, beat Milwaukee, beat New York, beat Boston. Okay, to go to the finals. To have a chance to win the NBA championship. I'll take that anyway, any day of the week over a stupid draft pick. This team is incredible. But like I said, I've been a fan 34 years. This is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite team I think I've watched in those 34 years because of the grit, because of the stories, because of the us against the world mentality. It was a fantastic year. Well, I say year because it was a year that was inconsistent, but a offseason that gave me some of the most fun. But again, also, I felt like I lost like 10 years of my life watching this team, in the playoffs because of the amount of stress it took watching them at times. So I'm very proud of this team. Now, for this team in the offseason, what are their needs? They need some size, obviously. I mean, obviously they're undersized against Denver. But the reason why I don't go crazy over size, though, is because there are only a few teams in the league that actually have a size advantage in Miami. Now, Denver's being one, of course. Philadelphia's being another one. I guess Memphis will probably in that conversation too also. But most of the league, while this league is starting to go back somewhat to centers again, or dominant centers in some sense, the rest of the league is pretty much still relatively small. And while Bam Adebayo is is an undersized center, he is still effective. Also, some stuff out of the game last night and out of the series. The Jimmy Butler criticism is warranted. He didn't play well in this series, really, if you think about it. I know he averaged 21 points a game, but he wasn't Jimmy. Obviously, the ankles was probably an issue. Although he said differently. He said the ankle was an issue, but I don't agree with that. I think he said that because he want to make excuses. That's who he is. The criticism is warranted for Jimmy Butler. He did not play well, especially in Game 5. Had a horrible 45 minutes. And in the last 3 minutes, he played, brought the team back, gave the Heat a 1 point lead twice late in that game. And had a costly turnover late. But let's keep perspective here. Because I see people tweeting some things out on social media. And again, this is the blessing and curse of having social media. People, you have more access to stupidity. Idiotic takes out there. Let's keep perspective here. Okay? He's not LeBron, yes. He's not KD. He's not, Jokic. He's not those guys. He's not Steph. Okay? He's a top 10 player in the league, though. Absolutely top 10 player in the league. They're not in this spot without Jimmy Butler. They're not even playing. They're not even in the playoffs without Butler. They're not even past the first round without Butler. Or in the conference finals without Butler. Or in the NBA finals without Butler. So what are we doing here? Like, what are we actually doing here? Like, I know it's cool to have the hot take and be critical and all that. And again, both things could be right here. Jimmy wasn't great when he needed to be. But to tell me this guy in 4 years, this guy has taken you to 2 NBA finals, was literally a 3-point shot from going to a third NBA finals in 4 years. I'll take that any day of the week. Do you remember his team was before Jimmy Butler got here? Do you remember Hassan Whiteside, Luke Babbitt, Josh McRoberts? You want to go back to that? Like, seriously. Like, have some perspective. Yes, the criticisms are warranted, and he's going to get it, and he'll take it as a man. But let's keep perspective here too. Big thing also for the Heat as well. They upped their assets. Duncan Robinson all of a sudden gone from a guy who was out of rotation to being a key contributor to this playoff run. All of a sudden, his contract doesn't look that bad anymore. Just saying. He's a trade asset possibly if they go after a big whale, which is now the next thing they got to figure out now too. Also, their main priority now is going to be: do they keep Gabe Vincent and Max Strus? Both, none, one. We'll see. I will say of the two guys, Vincent's probably the bigger priority. Strus, who's been really well for this team the last 2 years. But he did have moments in the series, especially too, where he just disappeared. You can find someone like that also too, I think, on the market. I like him a lot. I think Vincent, being a point guard that's not only a really good shooter, but also a very very good defensive player, hustle guy. I think his value is probably a little bit higher than Strus at this point now. He was a more consistent player throughout the playoffs than Strus was. The thing is, for the Heat, if they want to get further than this, obviously the further is now winning a championship, they need another whale. They need to find a way to extend Jimmy Butler's prime, because Butler's still in his prime, but he's probably closer to the end than to the front than to the beginning. He's 33 years old. You need another whale. And obviously the biggest one right now that could potentially be on the market is Damian Lillard. They need, the minute Lillard asks for a trade, the Heat need to figure that out. And obviously, I obviously know that if a Lillard trade does, come into focus, top players like Tyler Hero will be on the market. I'm sure. You have Kyle Lowry's expiring contract, possibly Duncan Robinson, some draft picks. He has some assets to play with. The two guys, in my opinion, are untouchable for the Heat at this point are Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. People say, why Bam? Because you may be frustrated at Bam this year with how he played in moments. And believe me, I'm there with you. But there is no comparison to Bam on the defensive side of the ball. Bam Adebayo is one of the probably three best defensive players in basketball. Okay? If you trade Bam for Lillard, I'll go forward and say this. Not only do this team not get better, even with that trade, they get worse. Because there's no one on defense that can do the things that Bam does. That can switch off on guards, on centers. Bam Adebayo's value to this team has risen in a big way especially in this series, and especially this playoff run. But what I've been saying is that if Bam is your third option, instead of your second option on offense, now Miami has a real shot at winning a title. Because Bam, I always said that Bam should be playing in that what I call the quote unquote Draymond Green role, where Draymond is not the second option; he could be the third option. At least in his peak, it was. That's the way he should be used. But obviously, Bam's even a lot more effective as an athlete. So, if Lillard asks for a trade, the minute he asks for a trade out of Portland, which I think many people expect that to happen at this point now, you go after him. You do it. You go after him and you try to make that work. But, Bam off the table. Jimmy off the table, obviously. Yeah. What a ride, though. What a ride to be a part of this as a fan for the last 2 months. Was it 2 months? Yes, 2 months. So I swear the NBA playoffs is like another season. It really is. I love it. We should go longer. For favorite sport, favorite league, and all of sports. So, yeah. Shout out to the Nuggets, of course, like I said. But shout out to also the Miami Heat for a job well done in the playoffs. Job well done. An 8 seed going to the finals. And an 8 seed also, by the way, I know they're the second 8 seed to ever do this in NBA history. But this is more impressive because this 8 seed actually played the entire year. Then Nick Tino's 8 seed was actually not as bad as you thought it were. In fact, that Nick Tino was an 8 seed in 99. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was only 6 games behind for the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. I'm not mistaken about that. And the reason they were that low was because shortened year, and they lost a bunch of players in the middle of the year, got them back late. So just something to think about. This team, however, grinded the entire year. 82 games, 2 playing games, and then the playoffs. So, again, job well done for the Heat. All right, like I said, we'll have more things about in the offseason. We'll have a lot of guests lined up over the course of the next couple weeks, especially too, talk about offseason and all that stuff and free agency, all that. We'll get to all that in a second. Total XFL news. XFL lost an estimated $60 million in its first season. Well, first season under this new incarnation of the XFL run by The Rock, Dwayne Rock Johnson. I'm going to read a piece here. $6 million first year. A lot of money. It's a lot of money to lose the first year. But, it's undeniable, though, that growing a league takes time. It does. Growing any business takes time. I talk about like AEW. Now, granted, AEW hasn't shown the books yet. AEW Wrestling, for example, hasn't shown the books yet, and they're now 4 years into the venture. And I doubt they're actually growing a profit, certainly a big profit right now. A lot of it too also is because the pocketbooks are pretty big. The con fans' pocketbooks are pretty big, but also it takes time. One prominent XFL backer said he compared the adventure to the annual expanding Major League Soccer, MLS, Major League Soccer, when talking with Forbes magazine. He projects Dwayne Johnson's passion project will be a cash flow positive by 2027. Look, I'm not sure if it will be cash flow positive, and if it is, will it be then or at all? I think the challenge here for the XFL more than anything else is trying to see if spring football can become a habit, because that's part of the problem. People love football. People love the NFL, though. And I'm not sure. I thought a couple years ago when the AAF was a thing that maybe it had a chance to people going to watch football, all 12 months of the year, whatever, and it clearly wasn't the case. The problem is, can you create enough habit, a watchable habit, for the people who are diehard fans of the sport itself? So a lot of people who are football passionate, they love the teams, love fantasy football, they love the NFL pomp and circumstance, all that. But they also love when the season's over, they can get away for a little bit. Do they love football as a sport, the aesthetic, enough to watch a product, regardless of the league? And that's the difference between the NFL and other teams, other potential leagues or promotions. Is, can you actually create a habit? And if and honestly, if you're going to do this kind of undertaking, you have to play a long game. This is not something that's going to be done. That's going to be, successful out the chute. Because again, you have to create the habit of spring football being a thing. There's a lot of people out there who don't realize the XFL still exists, or realize the USFL still exists, or exists at all, because they don't know. It's not a habit, because we've known for years. I know for years, even though there's been the World Football League for many years, and so often, and there's other leagues that come and gone. I know between the months of February and August, outside of preseason football, of course, in August, there's no football to watch for 6 months. That's just a reality. So you got to create a habit first before you can have this work. So, but I hope they're playing a long game here. I really do. $60 million is a lot of money, though. But is that a lot of money to where they can recover that? And would they expect that kind of loss? I don't know. Because I tell you what, the one thing I will say that's to the advantage of the XFL is that many networks at this point are starved for content. Starved of any content. So they're going to have people, networks, streaming companies up the wazoo trying to buy into this league to show it. Because just having content is huge. And XFL does provide that fresh content. But at what cost? That's the question. So, anyway, one more thing we got out of here. Some pro wrestling talk here. Because I love wrestling. Old school wrestling here. You guys know, legend, WWE Hall of Famer, Jake St. Roberts, has his own podcast, by the way, which I do listen from time to time. Mostly in clips, though, not entire episodes, mostly in clips. Obviously, all these wrestlers and personalities have their own podcast now, narrative podcast, right, which I love very much. My favorite one's obviously right now is Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash's podcast is probably the best one because his is not just wrestling. He goes into other topics, other like worldly topics, current events, politics, sports, maybe. But Jake Roberts was on the podcast, obviously his podcast, and the question was broached about Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, and were they, in his eyes, championship material? Here's I'm gonna play a 2-minute clip of this piece from his podcast.
Who is the better worker and why? Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart?
Neither.
Neither. That's going to get a reaction online.
I sure will.
Why do you say that?
What for? Better performer, Shawn.
Okay.
Bret just gets dull at times, and his interviews aren't up to par, I don't think, to what they should be for what position he held. I think his interviews were poor at best.
As for their styles in the ring, though, like you just didn't really care for either one?
They were part of that era that quit selling things,
mm-hmm.
And just did everything. I will give it to Bret that he did wrestle a lot more than Shawn.
Yes, he did.
But Bret, to me, just, oh boy, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. He just wasn't a champion to me. There, I said either one of them.
And do you base that on personality, their styles,
style, size, everything?
Yeah.
They were much smaller than what we've been accustomed to, and neither one of them looked like Bruno
or Hulk.
Definitely.
And I mean, so this will likely get a reaction online, but let's put it into context a little bit. Like, you're coming from the era when it was like gangbusters, red hot, out of control.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then all of a sudden Bret Hart is made champion. I'm not saying that there's a direct line here, but he's made champion, and then it's like sales are way down. Houses are way down. Everything is way down. Maybe it was a downtime. Maybe it was a downtime in the business. Maybe we just didn't have the right guy as the flag bearer for the company.
That's what I think it was.
Certainly something to think about.
Shawn didn't set nothing on fire either.
No. And look, it's, I'll play the other side of it. In between them, Kevin Nash was the champion, and he's a big guy with a great look, but maybe it was just a downtime. I don't know.
Well, if you get drugged down far enough, it takes a while to get back up.
That's the other end of it too. Once people turn that channel, it's really hard to get them to turn it back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that was Jake Roberts. By the way, shout out to him for still being alive, number one. If you guys know his story, Jake Roberts has had lots of demons in his life, drugs, you name it. And the fact he's still here with us, I mean, shout out to especially DDP, Don Dallas Page, for, DDP Yoga and helping change his life. Him and Scott Hall, prior to his passing, changed their life. Here's what I'll say about Jake Roberts' opinion here on this. I respect Jake Roberts' opinion because Jake Roberts is a master of not just the wrestling, or as a wrestler, one of the better wrestlers in history of sports entertainment, but also knew the psychology of, not just in the ring, but also promos. He's one of the better promos in the history of pro wrestling. I feel like his opinion does matter here, and I respect it, but I do think it's a little bit dated because, yes, I would have said Bret Hart at one point was not the best promo. Probably should have been a promo for a champion. I would agree with you years ago. But I will say that's something that improved as time went on. In fact, you go back to Bret Hart's 1997 run. When he turned heel again at WrestleMania 13, the double turn that this happened, him Austin, and that run up until he left the company in '97 in Montreal at Survivor Series. Obviously the Screwjob. I would argue Bret Hart's promos at that time was fantastic. I think all the stuff came together as a heel in that run. So I would agree with Jake. If Jake is talking about like Bret Hart pre-96 or pre-92, 93, when during the New Generation era, when Bret and Shawn were the two top guys in the company, I would agree with that. I think his opinion on Shawn, which he acknowledged is a phenomenal performer, arguably the best performer of all time. I think his opinion can be weighed in the fact that Shawn was an asshole backstage and hard to work with. But both guys drew emotion in a way that made you watch. It's also unfair, too, because these guys were also top of the company at a time where they suffered the most, at a time where WWE almost went out of business. When Vince was struggling to get eyeballs again after Hulk left. Bret and Shawn didn't have credit for holding that thing together until, 97, 98, the Attitude Era came around. I mean, Bret was a good champion. I thought Bret was a very good champion, actually. He wasn't typical like the Hogans and the Warriors and the Savages and those guys, because those guys are larger than life. But what Bret brought to the dance, though, was something refreshing. A smaller guy, unassuming, wearing pink, but tough. So that's why I disagree with Jake there. Again, if Jake is talking about Bret pre-97, 96, I see his argument fully. But we have to acknowledge the amount of changes he made and the policy changes he made and improvements he made, especially to his promos, especially 97. I mean, watch Bret's entire run when he came back to the company in 96 after that hiatus after WrestleMania 12. And you'll see, the improvements that Bret made. And again, Shawn, I understand Shawn, but I believe his reason for Shawn not being a championship materials more for the fact that he's just an asshole backstage. But there's no question on screen he was one of the best performers in history in the company. And he, Shawn doesn't have any really memorable championship runs. I guess his first one will stand out because it was the first, being Bret, and then he was champion until Survivor Series that year. But every title reign he had after that was pretty much, not hot potato, but almost if in a sense, because he was a number one guy, but it wasn't trusted because of him, losing a smile and being very tough to work with behind stage, but backstage rather. But I disagree with him, those guys not being championship material. I think those guys were, for what they did in that era, deserve all the flowers. And I'll leave it at that. So, anyway, I'll do it for this podcast. Before I get going, also, like I said, I announced to you guys last week on the podcast that my new basketball podcast, the Basketball Retrospective, we have already started work. We've already recorded 2 episodes now. Hoping to do a third one first, another one before I put it live. But the feed is now out officially on any podcast catcher. I put up a little trailer of the show, just giving the mission statement of the show. We're going to be releasing a couple episodes probably next week. I want to record one more episode before I get start putting out episodes weekly. So check out, again, it's the Basketball Retrospective podcast across any podcast catcher. And that will do it for this episode. Again, dated June 13, 2023. Again, I am on Twitter at EJ Christian 7. And we'll talk to you guys soon. We got more pods coming to you this week. Even though basketball's over, I still ain't stop talking. I'm not going to stop talking still. So we got a lot going on. So talk to you guys later. God bless y'all. And we'll enjoy Tuesday. Later.